We are ready to start our first Expert Insights panel for this summit event. And I'm very pleased to be joined here on stage by Mathilde Thye Kveiborg and Tanja Jensen. You are medical writers at the Aixial Group. I think we should give them a warm hand. And so the theme of this discussion will be then optimizing your chances of approval, how to achieve effective clinical and regulatory documents and overcome known obstacles, and not least save money and time. I think that's something that should interest quite a few people in the room these days. So just a short backdrop then. Mathilde and Tanja, you have promised to enlighten us and with your knowledge about regulatory documents, share the best tips you have for how to achieve effective regulatory documents, and hopefully that will lead to approvals that all the companies here are striving for. I'd like to ask you first, Mathilde, can you explain a little bit more what it is that you do, and why is that relevant to the audience here today?
Sure. So the medical writer role is quite broad, with the key responsibility to design and deliver fit-for-purpose documents that communicate often very complex information in a clear and concise and unambiguous way. We work with many different types of documents. The typical regulatory ones would be a protocol for a clinical study report, investigators' brochures. We also do quite a few scientific publications, and then we sometimes also help with marketing material or SOP writing. We all have a scientific background, so the far majority have PhDs and some also postdocs. And then, in addition to the scientific foundation we stand on, we have spent quite a few years gaining insights into what effective communication is when it comes to drug development. And this means that we have some tricks up our sleeve that can help accelerate clinical development by optimizing the regulatory documents that we send to the authorities.
So it's not just about having great science, you also have to be able to communicate that science.
Exactly,
I guess.
exactly.
So, but many people in this room and in the life science community, they know how to write. It's part of their degrees, you could say. You claim to be able to optimize the chances of approval and by saving time and money. So what can you offer that's different from what the other people already know?
Okay, so I'll start in more general terms. So it's about unfolding the story that emerges from the data. This is not something we do alone. We do that in a cross-functional team of experts representing various skill areas. But the medical writer role is then to help build the stories so that it comes out as a clear, with messaging, explaining how the different pieces of information tie together. And with that, that can help guide through the sponsor's flow of thought, mapping out how they then arrived at their conclusions. So with the medical writer on board, it's possible to produce documents that are both compliant and concise, but also that help aid the reader's understanding and interpretation of the data.
Yeah.
And when we talk about approval, are we talking about market approval, the finishing line, so to speak, or can you elaborate?
Well, that it is part. Not only it's part of the marketing approval as well, but it's also about clinical development program. You want that approved. And you also have other documents that you're going to submit along the clinical development that you're going to approve. So it's about that, but it's also about knowing the audience that you need. Especially there are two parts where you want to know. One part is behavioral science and neuroscience, so you understand the brain and how it searches for information. So all of you are busy and have busy days and have a demanding job, and so does the reviewers. So it's about knowing how to set up the document to ease their way of reading, because they skim through the document. They don't read it from top to bottom, and especially not in a chronological order. They get a big report and they search for answers, so they read for decision making.
And to follow up on that, I think it's very interesting because we know that they are skim readers. We know from eye scan recordings how a skim reader moves through a document. So with that, we can actively place the key messages in the position that receive most attention. So, and that's obviously something that can be used to the sponsor's strategic advantage, but it's also something that the regulators want us to do because it saves them time. It allows them to find the answers they need in order to then be able to grant the approval that we desire.
I'm learning a lot of new stuff here. I was under the impression that writing is more about talent, but obviously it's more science to it than I realized. I should also say that feel free in the audience to use the question app. You can find the QR code on page 3, and to write in any questions you might have for Tanja and Mathilde. So, speaking of then how to structure the information and so on, make it facilitated for the target group, basically. There are guidelines, regulatory guidelines, quite clear on what all these documents, if it's a protocol or whatever it is, should contain. So can't you just follow these guidelines and be home safe?
So regulatory guidelines are key, no doubt about that. But one thing is following those, that does require quite a bit of experience and also a deep understanding. Then it's important to keep in mind that most of what regulatory bodies issue are actually guidelines. They're not a strict set of rules that need to be followed. So it's really important to understand when it's appropriate to deviate from these and when it's absolutely not. And that's the regulatory component. Then there is also a very important component related to how data is presented. There is a survey from the American Medical Writers Association. They have asked a panel of regulators. These regulators have, on average, I think 10 years of experience. They spent the far majority of their working time reviewing regulatory documents. And when asked, 90% of these regulators say that they experience being unable to perform regulatory review due to the quality of the documents they receive. So if you let that sink in a little bit, 9 out of 10 of the regulators are unable to do their job because the scientific community is not able to deliver the documents that fit the purpose. So with that, it's so crucial to understand what are these barriers then, and how can they be overcome.
Yeah. So 9 out of 10, that rings a bell. I hope it doesn't correlate with how many projects are successful in the end. But obviously, being expert at this, what's the secret sauce, if you will? What are the most commonly known problems, and how should you overcome them?
Well, there are a number of factors that contribute. Poor explanation of rationale, excessive length, incomplete content. These are the key factors and most frequently reported in the study that Mathilde mentioned, where 9 of 10 reviewers can't do their job. And it's also the one with the greatest impact on the quality. And the medical writer, we know about this and we know what to do, and we can overcome these quality issues and prepare a high quality document. And we have some very, based on a long-term experience, we know what to do and how to do it. Have our tricks and tips.
Just a spontaneous thought is that there are quite a few early companies here. At what stage should you engage your type of expertise? Is it as early as possible, or is it at certain stages?
I would say very early, because you need to consider the writing in downstream documents as well. So if you have the full strategy, a medical writer would know, okay, this piece of information ties in with some downstream documents where you have to address questions. So for example, in a protocol, there are specific items you want to include because you know there are questions about that in a clinical trial report. Or for a publication, perhaps, that there are checklists, not only the author guidelines, but checklists as well for clinical trials, that we know that this should be covered if you want to publish in a high-impact journal.
So I realize I'm deviating a little bit from the script here, but I can imagine then that you have encountered projects when you come in and you have some previous, content to look at, and how often do you look into it and see that, oh my God, this is not very good?
It happens. It happens. It depends on the experience of the company, how much they've been working on it. And also, for matter of efficiency, we try to align the information across documents and reuse text and reuse models. And that's also a way to be consistent, because inconsistency is a flag for regulators. And also inconsistency in a document is, a reader might think, okay, are you talking about 3 different things here? You use a different terminology. So that's things that we are very picky about to make clearer in a document. And also how you navigate through a document could be made easier, because it's a thick report and reviewers don't have much time, so they need to skim through it and find cues and signs to address their questions.
So consistency and clarity are key.
Yep.
So imagine then someone in the audience are about to embark on this journey of writing a protocol, for example. What are the most important things to consider then, if they are, at the beginning?
Yeah, and so the protocol, that's a tool for navigating and understanding a clinical trial, and there are a lot of stakeholders involved. And one of them are the investigators. They spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes before they meet a subject that's in the trial. So they have to quickly sift through the protocol to understand, okay, what is it that we should do with this patient today? And when you build or design the protocol, you take that into consideration. And it's actually similar to IKEA.
How so?
IKEA has this, all the stores are the same, and we have templates which are the same. You can vary between them, but ideally you have the same template, so the investigator recognizes from company to company where the information is. And then at the entrance of IKEA, there's a map, a very clear overview of what you're going to expect when you come into the store. There's a trail guiding you through every department of the store, optimizing IKEA's profit, probably. And then they have this story they tell with clear patterns of the rooms and signs. So for a protocol, the analogy here is, what I want the audience to take home is some steps. S, T, P, P, S, S. So S is for structure. You want a clear structure in your document, and you can do this. I typically add some extra headings, heading levels, which are very descriptive, because that's a way to manage the reader's expectation. Where can I find the answer to my questions? Oh, it seems to be here, and then they read it and they found it. T is for trail. It's a logical trail. We build blocks of messages that tie into each other and unfold a story. P is for pattern. You want to establish a pattern. In a protocol, in the trial design, it could be what should be assessed, when should it be done, and where. In a clinical trial report, we always start with the main message up front. We justify that message, and then we substantiate it with the science. And then this builds trust with the reader, because they recognize the pattern, and then they know they can go through the entire document finding the information very quickly to address what they're going to do. So it's structure, trail, pattern. Next S is for story. We unfold a story, sharing, building up with these blocks the full picture, and there's no piece missing, so you get what it is. And in a clinical trial report and not a protocol, you have a data set that tells a story. So the medical writer provides the trends and the main strokes. It's not a data dump where you just provide a thick appendix with all the tabulations and say, go fetch to the reviewer. We provide them with the information because they're busy people and their brains are lazy. They want to have the information served. And the last S is for science, visual science. So use a lot of tables, figures, flowcharts, bullet points, descriptive headings, cross-references to signal this is important, take a look at this, and then also make it available for skim reading. So the steps is a way of building the design, and then there's logical or practical things as well. Now I talk a lot, but I want to tell these two things as well. It's about strategy, a long-term strategy, and the stakeholders. So the long-term strategy is understanding that there are downstream documents that you need to consider for what you're preparing in the protocol, and bear that in mind. What answers should I answer later, and what is my end goal, my indication, or the device? And the stakeholders is about the medical writer. They facilitate a lot of discussions, and they pick their stakeholders' brain to put that into the protocol. And they have their own language, so there's a lot of inconsistencies that just bound to happen. And that's also where we come in to ensure that we are speaking the same language, we use the same terminology, as everybody is on the same page for a good protocol, and then patient safety and trial integrity will just rise.
So I kind of like the analogy with IKEA, because then at least it used to be that you could go there, save time and save some money. And that's something that you claim that you will be able to do for the companies. And I'm pretty sure that quite a few investors are interested in that aspect as well, seeing as capital is scarce nowadays, and we need to, preserve your runway and so on. So how would you say that you concretely then help the companies save money? Because I guess you also cost money.
I can elaborate on that. So I'm sure that everyone in this room can appreciate that when it comes to drug development, time equals money. And coming back to the survey I referenced earlier, the regulators expressed that 80% of the applications that are ultimately approved, so the ones that contain everything they need in order to obtain an approval, 80% of these are delayed due to issues that can be directly attributed to poor document quality. So by following Tanja's advice, you could frankly say that then these 80% would have been approved straight away. Then this relates to things that go on during regulatory review, but it's also very much the case during trial conduct. So you asked how often we see protocols, for example, that don't quite meet the standards. As head of department, I receive quite a few requests for proposals in our company. And it's very often that I see these protocols where it's so easy to map out what needs to be done and how this would be much more efficient. And
if you have the experience as we do. Yeah.
Yes, yes, with the experience and with the understanding of what it needs to be used for at the investigator's site. He needs to use it as a lexicon, as a document he can look into and easy to, as Tanja alluded to, easy to navigate, find the exact information he needs. And when that's not in place, then we often see it leading to inconsistencies in the procedures that are performed at the trial site and also in the data that's collected, ending up with a poor data quality. Then what we also often see is that then when a clinical study is ongoing and the protocol isn't quite clear on what needs to be done, the sponsor realizes that we need to update the protocol. That's what we call a protocol amendment. And these are very large drivers of cost during clinical development. So having a clearer starting protocol can lead to fewer protocol amendments, thereby saving time.
And the amendments cause a delay as well.
Yes.
And in Europe, with the new guidelines, it's quite complex to navigate through and ensure that you can just create the amendment as well. So that's also part of it.
For sure, for sure. And then the last piece I just wanted to cover is that that I alluded to in the beginning, time equals money when it comes to drug development. So once you are close to a marketing authorization application, every day counts. So, and we know that some drugs bring in revenue worth of hundreds of millions euros every quarter. So what we in drug development would characterize as a slight delay of a couple of months maybe is a substantial lost income for a company. So I hope that answered the question about the time and money aspect.
And I'm pretty sure that investors appreciate if you don't lose time as well. So now we're talking about protocols and study protocols and so on, study design. Do these principles then of communication that you have laid out here, do they apply to other things, regulatory documents? So if you're writing a scientific publication or a grant, if you're applying for a grant, for example, does it work as well?
Yep. No, well, yes, I think it does, because all regulatory documents and all, I would stretch and say all documents benefit from having a good structure and having a quick way of navigating your way around them and understanding them. Because people who read them, they make decisions based on them, and they're made for decision making. So I would say the same principles apply for the documents, even if you might modify them, but overall the same principles would apply.
I can give an example. So we were approached by a client. It's a Danish client called AJ Vaccines. And they have had conducted their last study in their development program and asked us to write up their scientific publication. You asked for an example on that. And because we are so familiar with writing clearly and concisely, following the applicable guidelines, we could lay out a very solid submission strategy leading to a first round approval. This is extremely rare. You may know that, those of you who have written scientific publications, this is extremely rare. So there were no comments from the journal editor, no comments from the journal reviewer, and it was approved in 3.5 weeks. Usually when you submit a scientific publication, the standard timeline until acceptance is 17 weeks. It goes through multiple rounds of review with substantial modifications being needed. Often we also see a need to change target journal, leading to additional modifications because there are the new author guidelines with the new journal you need to follow. So by our expertise in identifying the right journal and meeting the journal standards, we could save this client substantial time and also money in the end.
Well, that's great. I can also imagine that if you submit your protocol or your documents with the correct structure, and you become the reviewer's favorite student, so to speak,
yes.
Not end up at the bottom of the pile. We actually have a few questions from the audience, but I was going to ask you first to sort of sum up what would be the most important key takeaways for the audience here from you today.
Want to go first?
Yep. I think the analogy with IKEA is a good one that will help you remember the steps that I panned out. So it's structure, trail, pattern, story, and signals. So if you remember how to use these things, then you've come a long way.
Yes, and mine would be that following these principles and delivering efficient regulatory documents is an often overlooked but key avenue to securing success in your clinical development program. So I hope that you, those of you who do work with drug development, can use these tips to help accelerate your development programs.
Thank you very much. And you should also mention that since this session is being recorded, we will publish it after the event, and then you can all go back and review and sort of remember what was said here, because it's a lot of information to take in. So
I can add, we also we have a booth outside also with the written up paper, if you prefer a paper version to it.
Perfect. So, and they can come over in the break also to just pick your brains.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So we have a few questions, and I think I'm going to start out with the perhaps most pointed one. So brace yourselves. How does ChatGPT affect your business?
I think that's really interesting. Because ChatGPT can help us prepare a first draft to a big extent if we understand which questions we should ask and which prompts to use. So that can be helpful, but what it can't do yet is to analyze the data. It can't make any interpretations, it can't draw any conclusions. So the medical writer would have to do that, but we get a lot of help along the way to have some draft text that we can use. And also, as I said, we reuse text. And if you can get ChatGPT to have these modules of text and populate different sections, then we don't have to spend time on copy-pasting a lot of text and then start writing. We can just dive into the cognitive work and start interpreting, analyzing, and unfolding the story. So it's going to be very helpful.
So, and then I need to ask, because related to that is, of course, the issue of privacy of data and the value, I mean, IP and so on.
Confidentiality.
So how, if you enter data into ChatGPT, then it's out there.
Yep.
So how can you sort of make sure that you don't compromise any?
Some companies have their own ChatGPT, so it's confided in within the walls of the company, just as every other document is. But that's a big security issue to not put data in there that could compromise confidentiality.
Mm. Yes, cool. Okay, let's see. More. Yes, what are the most common mistakes made in drug development communication? If you could perhaps outline a few of them shortly, briefly.
So I can name a few of what I observe. I often see a lack of consistency in documents, and I think that's unappreciated, the impact of writing with consistency. Because if you use different terms, I had a protocol in my department that we were working on. There were 9 different ways of mentioning the trial product that they use. And 9 different ways, and this is not a bad protocol, a bad sponsor. It's just because there are multiple authors and people don't quite appreciate that when you then have different terms, that signal differences to the brain. So in the end, an end user like an investigator may be wondering, is it the same thing or is it 2 different things when they write it different ways? So I think that consistency is something that is often unappreciated. And speaking now of ChatGPT, that's next generation, something that we already use a lot is our tools to enable consistency. So checkers that are add-ins to Microsoft Word that can help us identify these inconsistencies so that it can be alleviated in a matter of hours rather than. And then your second question was related to, there was the consistency part, and then there is the understanding what actually needs to go in which section. I often find extremely lengthy scientific introductions in a protocol where, according to ICH, a protocol introduction should be giving a rationale for the study and focus on risks and benefits for the patients. And then the rest can go to the IB. That'll give the sponsor a much better document, or the investigator a much better document to work with.
So
that was all, sorry.
No, so could you say that there are no actual points in writing longer rather than shorter?
No, that was also one of the AMVA, the survey that we talked about, that they said it's excessive length, it's too wordy. So there's the signal to noise that you need to consider what information should you share and not the rest.
Mm. So we are actually running out of time, but I would like to relay one final question. It's fairly concrete. Do you also work with EFSA applications?
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Short answer is yes.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure that if anyone has any other queries regarding what you can help out with, you'll be happy to answer them then in the breaks, and you are going to be here for 2 days.
Mm.
Yeah. thank you very much for coming and enlightening us.
Thank you very much
Thanks
for having us.